Imagine you are standing on a sheet of ice 2 miles thick. Beneath your feet lies frozen water that has been here for 400,000 years. You are in Greenland, the largest island on Earth, a frozen landmass so vast it covers 836,000 square miles. That is larger than France, Germany, Spain, and the United Kingdom combined. And right now, you are standing on top of what might be the most valuable piece of real estate on the planet. Look around you. There is nothing but ice and silence stretching to the horizon in every direction. No cities, no roads, no people. The population of this enormous island is just 56,000. That is fewer people than live in a single suburb of any major American city. From the surface, Greenland looks like the most worthless territory on Earth. A frozen wasteland, a barren rock covered in ice. For centuries, that is exactly what the world believed. They were catastrophically wrong, because beneath that ice lies the largest untapped reservoir of rare earth minerals on the planet. Beneath that ice lies enough oil and natural gas to rival the reserves of Saudi Arabia. Beneath that ice lies the strategic key to controlling the entire Arctic Ocean, the new frontier of 21st century geopolitics. And right now, 3 superpowers are locked in a silent war for control of this frozen prize. The United States, China, and Russia are all making their moves. The Arctic ice is melting at a rate that has shocked scientists. Shipping routes that were impossible for all of human history are now opening up. Resources that were locked away for millennia are becoming accessible. And Greenland sits at the center of it all. In August 2019, President Donald Trump made headlines around the world when he suggested that the United States should buy Greenland from Denmark. The media treated it as a joke. Late-night comedians mocked the idea. The Danish Prime Minister called the proposal absurd. But here is what nobody in the media understood. The proposal was not absurd. It was not a joke. It was the most strategically important real estate conversation the United States has had in a century. And the fact that it was dismissed so quickly reveals just how badly the American public misunderstands what is happening in the Arctic. Because this is not about buying an island. This is about controlling the 21st century. This is about who controls the shipping lanes that will carry half the world's trade by 2050. This is about who controls the rare earth minerals that power every smartphone, every electric vehicle, every missile guidance system on Earth. This is about who controls the military, high ground of the Northern Hemisphere. And right now, the United States is losing that battle. In this video, we are going to show you why Greenland has suddenly become the most contested territory on Earth. We are going to show you the 500 years of history that led to this moment. We are going to show you the $12 trillion in resources that lie beneath the ice. We are going to show you China's secret plan to dominate the Arctic, and we are going to show you why the next decade will determine whether the United States remains a superpower or becomes a second-rate nation dependent on Chinese supply chains. The Arctic power shift has already begun, and Greenland is ground zero. To understand why Greenland matters today, you have to understand why nobody wanted it for centuries. And that story begins with a lie. In the year 982 AD, a Viking outlaw named Erik the Red was banished from Iceland for manslaughter. He sailed west into the unknown Atlantic and discovered a massive island covered in ice and rock. Erik was not just a warrior. He was also a salesman. He knew that if he wanted to attract settlers to this harsh new land, he needed to give it an appealing name. So he called it Greenland. It was one of history's first real estate marketing scams. The Vikings established settlements along Greenland's southwestern coast. For nearly 500 years, they farmed, hunted, and traded with Europe. Then, in the 15th century, they simply vanished. The exact cause remains a mystery. Climate change, likely a cooling period known as the Little Ice Age, made survival increasingly difficult. Trade with Europe declined. The settlements were abandoned. By 1500, the Norse colonies in Greenland were gone, swallowed by the ice and forgotten by history. Greenland sat empty of European presence for over 200 years. Then in 1721, a Danish-Norwegian missionary named Hans Egede arrived with a small group of settlers. He was searching for the lost Norse colonies, hoping to convert any surviving Vikings to Lutheranism. He found no Vikings, but he found something else. He found Inuit communities who had inhabited Greenland for 4,500 years, surviving in conditions that had defeated the Europeans. Denmark claimed Greenland as a colony. For the next 250 years, Greenland was a forgotten backwater of the Danish realm. The Danes established trading posts. They converted the Inuit to Christianity. They extracted what little resources they could: seal skins, whale oil, fish. But Greenland was never profitable. It was a money pit, a frozen drain on the Danish treasury. The only reason Denmark kept it was national pride. Greenland was the last remnant of Denmark's medieval empire. Then came World War II, and everything changed. On April 9, 1940, Nazi Germany invaded and occupied Denmark. The Danish government surrendered within hours. But Greenland, 2,000 miles away across the Atlantic, was suddenly orphaned. The island was technically under German control, but no German forces could reach it. The United States saw an opportunity. And, more importantly, the United States saw a threat. Look at a map of the North Atlantic. Greenland sits between North America and Europe like a massive aircraft carrier frozen in place. From Greenland, German U-boats could establish weather stations to improve their Atlantic hunting. From Greenland, long-range aircraft could reach the American mainland. The strategic implications were terrifying. President Franklin Roosevelt understood immediately that the United States could not allow Germany to establish a presence in Greenland. In April 1941, 8 months before Pearl Harbor, the United States signed a treaty with the Danish ambassador in Washington, Henrik Kaufmann. Kaufmann had refused to recognize the Nazi occupation of Denmark. He signed the Greenland Defense Agreement on his own authority, essentially defying his occupied government. The agreement gave the United States the right to establish military bases anywhere in Greenland for the duration of the war. American troops poured into Greenland. They built airfields, radar stations, and weather outposts. They hunted down German weather teams that had secretly landed on the island. And, crucially, they established the air bridge to Europe. American aircraft flying from Greenland could reach Britain without the dangerous mid-Atlantic crossing. Thousands of planes flew this route. Greenland became the stepping stone that helped win the war. When the war ended, the United States did not want to leave. They had discovered what the frozen island was really worth. In 1946, the United States made Denmark an offer. We will buy Greenland for $100 million in gold. That is approximately $1.6 billion in today's money. It was an extraordinary sum. Denmark had just been liberated from Nazi occupation. The country was devastated. The offer was generous. Denmark said no. The rejection surprised American officials. Greenland was a financial burden on Denmark. It produced almost nothing. It cost more to administer than it generated in revenue. Why would Denmark refuse $100 million for a frozen money pit? The answer was national identity. Greenland was the last piece of Denmark's empire. Selling it would reduce Denmark to a tiny, irrelevant nation in Northern Europe. Danish politicians understood that their leverage with the United States came precisely from controlling something America wanted. If they sold Greenland, they would lose that leverage forever. Instead, Denmark negotiated a different arrangement. In 1951, the two countries signed the Defense of Greenland Agreement. The United States would be allowed to maintain military bases in Greenland indefinitely. In exchange, Denmark remained sovereign over the island, and America would help defend it. The most important of these bases was Thule Air Base, built in the remote northwest of Greenland, just 950 miles from the North Pole. Thule became the cornerstone of American Arctic defense during the Cold War. It housed bomber squadrons capable of reaching the Soviet Union over the polar route. It operated radar systems that would detect incoming Soviet missiles. It was and remains the northernmost U.S. military installation on Earth. If nuclear war had broken out, Thule would have been one of the first targets and one of the most important launch points for American retaliation. But Thule had a dark secret. To build the base, the United States and Denmark forcibly relocated the indigenous Inuit people who had lived in the area for centuries. In 1953, the Inuit were given 4 days to pack their belongings and move 100 kilometers north to a new settlement called Konanak. Many died in the harsh conditions of the forced march. The survivors spent decades fighting for compensation and the right to return. The Danish government did not formally apologize until 1999. The Cold War made Greenland more valuable than ever. But even then, no one understood what really lay beneath the ice. For most of history, Greenland's ice sheet was seen as a barrier, a frozen wall that locked away whatever lay beneath. But starting in the 2000s, geologists began to understand that the ice was not just a barrier. It was a vault, and inside that vault lay perhaps the most valuable collection of natural resources on Earth. Let me give you the numbers, because the numbers are staggering. Greenland is estimated to hold 31.4 billion barrels of oil in offshore reserves. At current prices, that is worth approximately $2.5 trillion. The island also holds an estimated 148 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. That is worth another $750 billion. Combined, Greenland's hydrocarbon reserves rival those of Nigeria or Libya. But oil and gas are almost irrelevant compared to what else Greenland contains. Rare earth elements. These are the 17 metallic elements that power the modern world. Neodymium for electric motors, dysprosium for wind turbines, lanthanum for hybrid car batteries, europium for smartphone screens, praseodymium for aircraft engines, terbium for solid-state drives. Without rare earth elements, there are no electric vehicles, no smartphones, no wind turbines, no guided missiles, no MRI machines, no fiber optic cables, no computer chips. Rare earths are the backbone of every advanced technology on Earth. And right now, China controls 60% of global rare earth mining and 90% of global rare earth processing. That means China has a chokehold on the supply chain for every piece of advanced technology produced anywhere in the world. If China decided to cut off rare earth exports tomorrow, the United States would be unable to produce F-35 fighter jets, Patriot missiles, Virginia-class submarines, or Abrams tanks. Our entire defense industrial base depends on Chinese rare earth processing. This is not hypothetical. In 2010, China briefly cut off rare earth exports to Japan during a diplomatic dispute. Prices spiked 1,000% within weeks. Japanese manufacturers panicked. The entire high-tech supply chain went into crisis. China only restored exports after Japan backed down politically. It was a demonstration of power that sent shockwaves through every government in the developed world. Now, here is where Greenland becomes critical. Geological surveys have revealed that Greenland may contain the largest undeveloped deposits of rare earth elements on the planet. The Kvanefjeld deposit in southern Greenland is estimated to hold 11.1 million tons of rare earth oxides. The Greenland deposit contains an estimated 4.3 billion tons of or rich in rare earths and other critical minerals. Together, these deposits could supply global rare earth demand for decades. But that is not all. Greenland also contains massive deposits of uranium, zinc, iron, or rubies, sapphires, and gold. The Isua iron ore deposit alone contains 1 billion tons of high-grade ore. The total value of Greenland's known mineral resources has been estimated at over $12 trillion. And those are just the resources we have found. Large portions of Greenland have never been surveyed because they remain covered in ice. Here is the terrifying part: the ice is melting. Greenland's ice sheet is losing 280 billion tons of ice every year. That is enough water to fill 112 million Olympic swimming pools annually. Every year, the ice sheet retreats further, exposing more land, making more resources accessible. Climate scientists estimate that if current trends continue, Greenland will be substantially ice-free by the end of this century. From a human perspective, this is a catastrophe. melting Greenland ice is contributing to sea level rise that threatens coastal cities around the world. But from a strategic perspective, the melting ice is creating a gold rush. Resources that were locked away for hundreds of thousands of years are becoming accessible, and whoever controls Greenland will control access to those resources. This brings us to the most dangerous development of all. China has noticed. In 2018, the Chinese government published a document called China's Arctic Policy. It was the first time Beijing had formally articulated its intentions for the polar region. The document declared China to be a near-Arctic state with legitimate interests in Arctic development. Look at a map. China is not remotely near the Arctic. Beijing is at the same latitude as Philadelphia. The closest Chinese territory to the Arctic Circle is over 900 miles away. Calling China a near-Arctic state is like calling Brazil a near-Antarctic state. It is geographically absurd. But China does not care about geography. China cares about resources. And China has a plan. The plan is called the Polar Silk Road. It is an extension of China's Belt and Road Initiative into the Arctic. The strategy has three components. First, shipping routes. As Arctic ice melts, new shipping lanes are opening that dramatically shorten the distance between Asia and Europe. The Northern Sea route along Russia's Arctic coast reduces the journey from Shanghai to Rotterdam by 40% compared to the Suez Canal route. The Northwest Passage through Canada's Arctic islands offers similar savings. China is investing heavily in ice-capable cargo ships and Arctic port infrastructure. They want to control these routes the same way they have come to dominate the South China Sea shipping lanes. Second, resources. China needs rare earth minerals, but even more critically, it needs to ensure that no other country can develop independent rare earth supplies that would break China's monopoly. By investing in Arctic mining operations, China can either secure resources for itself or prevent competitors from accessing them. This is the same strategy China has used across Africa and Latin America. Third, and most alarmingly military positioning. The Arctic Ocean is the shortest route for intercontinental ballistic missiles traveling between China and the United States. It is also the operating area for America's nuclear ballistic missile submarines. China has been rapidly expanding its submarine fleet and developing Arctic-capable naval vessels. A Chinese military presence in the Arctic would give them surveillance capabilities over American nuclear deterrent forces. Now, where does Greenland fit into this strategy? In 2016, a Chinese mining company called General Nice Group attempted to purchase an abandoned Danish naval base at Needle in southern Greenland. The base would have given China a foothold on the island, a deepwater port, and infrastructure that could be converted to dual military-civilian use. The deal was rejected at the last minute after intervention from the Danish government, reportedly under pressure from Washington. In 2017, a Chinese state-owned company made a bid to build 2 airports in Greenland. The airports would be the first major international standard facilities on the island, capable of handling large cargo planes and long-haul passenger jets. Again, the project was blocked after American objections. In 2018, Chinese investors attempted to acquire rights to the Kvanefjeld rare earth deposit. This would have given China control over one of the largest rare earth reserves outside its own territory. The deal collapsed after intense international scrutiny. Each time, China has been blocked. But each time, China has come back with new proposals, new investments, new attempts to gain a foothold in Greenland. The pattern is unmistakable. China is executing a long-term strategy to establish influence over the island. And they are finding willing partners. Here is the part that most Americans do not understand. Greenland is not just a Danish colony anymore. In 1979, Greenland gained home rule, giving the island's parliament control over domestic affairs. In 2009, Greenland gained even greater autonomy, including control over natural resources and the right to declare full independence through a referendum. Greenland is slowly moving toward independence, and independence requires money. Currently, Greenland receives an annual subsidy of approximately $600 million from Denmark. That represents roughly half of Greenland's government budget. Without Danish money, Greenland cannot function as an independent state. The island's economy is too small, too dependent on fishing, too undeveloped to sustain itself. This creates a dangerous dynamic. Greenland's leaders want independence. Independence requires economic development. Economic development requires foreign investment, and China is offering that investment with no political strings attached. From Greenland's perspective, Chinese money is attractive precisely because it is not American or Danish. Taking Chinese investment feels like true independence, not just trading one colonial master for another. Many Greenlanders are suspicious of American intentions, remembering the forced relocations at Thule, the nuclear accidents that were covered up for decades, the general disregard for local concerns. The irony is devastating. Greenland's legitimate desire for self-determination may end up delivering the island into Chinese influence. And if that happens, the United States will face a strategic nightmare. So, where does the United States stand in this Arctic Cold War? The honest answer is badly behind. Russia has 40 icebreakers, including nuclear-powered vessels capable of smashing through Arctic ice year-round. The United States has 2 operational icebreakers. 2. China, which has no Arctic coastline at all, has more icebreakers than America. Russia has been building military bases across its Arctic coastline, reopening Soviet air facilities, deploying advanced air defense systems, and conducting large-scale military exercises. The United States has Thule Air Base, which is being upgraded but remains the only significant American Arctic installation. Russia and China signed a joint statement in 2023 declaring their cooperation on Arctic development. They are coordinating investments, sharing technology, and presenting a united front against Western Arctic interests. The United States has no comparable partnership in the region. This is the context for Trump's 2019 proposal to buy Greenland. It was not real estate speculation. It was a recognition that the United States is losing the Arctic competition and needs a dramatic move to change the dynamics. Consider what ownership of Greenland would mean for American strategic positioning. Control of the world's largest island would give the United States an unsinkable aircraft carrier in the North Atlantic. Greenland's position makes it ideal for monitoring Russian submarine activity as they transit from their Arctic bases to the Atlantic. It would extend American radar coverage across the polar region. It would provide bases for search and rescue operations as Arctic shipping increases. Control of Greenland's rare earth deposits would break China's monopoly on critical minerals. American manufacturers could source rare earths from a domestic supply chain, eliminating the vulnerability that currently exists. Defense contractors would no longer depend on Chinese processing for essential components. Control of Greenland's waters would give the United States influence over emerging Arctic shipping routes. As the Northwest Passage becomes navigable, ships transiting between Asia and the American East Coast would pass through waters adjacent to Greenland. Controlling that choke point would provide enormous economic leverage. The 2019 purchase offer failed because Denmark refused to even discuss it. But the underlying American interest has not changed. If anything, it has intensified. In 2020, the United States reopened a consulate in Nuuk, Greenland's capital, for the first time since 1953. This was a direct signal that America was paying attention to the island again. In 2021, Secretary of State Antony Blinken visited Greenland, the first such visit by a top American diplomat in decades. He announced increased American investment in the island and stronger cooperation on resource development. In 2022, the Pentagon announced a major upgrade to the Thule radar systems, investing over $200 million in new space surveillance capabilities. In 2023, the United States signed a new defense cooperation agreement with Denmark that expanded American access to Greenland and committed both countries to blocking Chinese investment in critical infrastructure. The race for Greenland is accelerating, and the stakes could not be higher. So, what happens next? The most likely scenario is a continued three-way competition between the United States, China, and Russia for Arctic influence. Greenland will be the central prize in this competition. Denmark will try to maintain sovereignty while balancing pressure from all sides. Greenland's own government will try to leverage the competition to maximize investment and move toward independence. The United States has several advantages. It has an existing military presence at Thule. It has a defense alliance with Denmark through NATO. It has a shared cultural and political heritage with Greenland. And it has the ability to offer investment that comes with genuine democratic values rather than Chinese-style debt traps. But the United States also has significant weaknesses. American attention to the Arctic has been sporadic and underfunded. The icebreaker gap is embarrassing. Investment in Arctic infrastructure has lagged behind rhetoric, and the historical treatment of Greenland's indigenous population has created distrust that China expertly exploits. The critical variable is Greenland independence. If Greenland remains part of the Danish realm, American influence is relatively secure through the NATO alliance. But if Greenland declares independence in the next decade, as many Greenlanders hope, the situation becomes unpredictable. An independent Greenland would need to make choices. Would it join NATO on its own? Would it accept a bilateral defense agreement with the United States? Would it remain neutral and accept investment from whoever offers the best terms? Would it drift into the Chinese orbit in exchange for development funding? The answers to these questions will be determined in the next 10 to 15 years, and they will shape the global balance of power for the rest of the century. Consider the worst-case scenario for the United States. Greenland declares independence in 2030. The new government, eager to assert sovereignty, distances itself from both Denmark and the United States. China offers a massive investment package, $50 billion in infrastructure development with no political conditions attached. Greenland accepts. Chinese companies begin mining rare earth deposits. Chinese engineers build ports and airfields. Chinese research stations appear along the coast. By 2040, Greenland has become economically dependent on China. The United States is asked to vacate Thule Air Base. American radar coverage of the Arctic collapses. Chinese naval vessels begin transiting through Greenland's waters. American nuclear submarines lose their operating sanctuary. The rare earth supply chain remains under Chinese control. The Arctic becomes a Chinese-Russian lake. This scenario is not inevitable, but it is possible, and preventing it requires American policymakers to treat Greenland with the strategic seriousness it deserves. The Arctic is warming twice as fast as the rest of the planet. Every year, more ice melts, more resources become accessible, and more shipping routes become viable. The Arctic that exists today will be unrecognizable by 2050. And whoever controls the high ground of the Arctic will have enormous influence over the 21st century global order. Greenland is that high ground. It is the largest island on Earth, sitting at the crossroads of 3 continents. It contains trillions of dollars in natural resources that the world desperately needs. It commands the sea approaches to North America and Europe. It is the key to the Arctic. For 500 years, Greenland was the island nobody wanted, a frozen wasteland, a footnote to history. Today, it is the most important piece of real estate on the planet. The question is not whether Greenland matters. The question is who will control it. And that question is being answered right now. History teaches us that the nations that control strategic choke points control the flow of global trade and power. Britain controlled the Suez Canal and dominated the 19th century. The United States controlled the Panama Canal and dominated the 20th century. The nation that controls the Arctic shipping routes and the rare earth minerals beneath Greenland's ice may dominate the 21st century. The ice is melting. The clock is ticking. The Arctic power shift has begun. And Greenland, the island Erik the Red named as a marketing trick 1,000 years ago, may end up being the most important piece of real estate in human history. Subscribe to stay ahead of the curve. because when the history books are written, you will want to be among the few who saw it coming.